and welcome to another Here's Homewood. I'm Rich Hofeld, your village president, and today I'm going to talk with Vietnam vets. My guests are Jim Barima, Ken Rusino, and Ralph DeWitt. Welcome to Here's Homewood.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Jim, a little bit about your background.
Well, I was born in Chicago, south side of Chicago in Englewood, and went to high school at Fenger High School on the south side by Roseland. As far as my Army career goes, I was drafted in 1967 into the Army, and I was an MP when I got sent over to Vietnam. 2 years drafted, and spent a year in Long Binh, Vietnam, which is right above Saigon, in the 720th MP Battalion in Long Binh.
Ken, a little bit about your background.
I grew up on south side of Chicago, around 76th, Indiana. My family moved around a lot when I was a kid. Then my dad finally found a residence in Oak Lawn and Evergreen Park. Went to Evergreen Park High School in my freshman year, moved again to Riverdale, and then I graduated from Thornton High School.
And you were a Homewood police officer, as was Jim.
Yes.
I forgot that.
Yeah.
Skipped over that.
How long have you been on the department?
Well, I retired after 29 years, and then, as you know, I became a reserve officer, and then also I'm part-time community service officer now. So now we're at year 34.
And you're out there every day?
Yeah, basically.
Most every day.
Yeah.
Jim, your family, how many children do you have? And
4 children, 3 daughters and 1 son. Matt's 29, Amy's 28, Reagan's 26, and Allie's 17. She's a senior now at HF.
so you have one at home?
1 at home, 1 left.
That's always that hope.
Yes,
Right.
correct.
And yourself, Ken?
I got 4 kids, and I still have 1 at home. I have another son that's still going to college, and but he's got his own apartment. Because I moved around a lot when I was a kid, I wanted a nice home for my kids, so I had a home built in Homewood in the Woodboro subdivision, and I was in that home for 26 years.
Ralph?
Well, I was born south side of Chicago also. Went to Harlan High School, 96 in Michigan, graduated from there. Went to college for a year in Nebraska, small school, Doane College. Spent a year out there, and then after that, just sort of decided that 1968 I was bored, so I enlisted. So not the brightest thing that anybody's ever done. But
You were an RA, and
Oh,
they were USs.
yeah, I was an RA, so that explains one thing already. So
I was an ER, enlisted reserve.
yeah, good for you. But and you know, I have 1 daughter. She's unfortunately she's 24, but she's still at home. And we moved here in Homewood about 10 years ago, so she could go to HF, which has worked out really well for us, and we enjoy it.
And you were a police officer also.
I was a Chicago police officer for 20 years. I was a lieutenant in Chicago, and I left the city to go to the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, where I've been for the last 17 years.
Jim, you entered the service when?
1967, January 31st.
And you were drafted.
Yeah.
And where did you go for basic?
Fort Campbell, Kentucky for basic, and then MOS for MP training in Fort Gordon, Georgia. And then for 4 months I was shipped to upper New York State. There was a little base there right in the Finger Lakes. Have you ever heard of the Finger Lakes? Beautiful New York State. And 4 months there before I got my orders to go to Vietnam.
The climate there acclimated you for the...
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was perfect, yeah.
Had you ever been involved in any police work up until that time?
Up until then, no.
So that really gave you your background in police work.
Yeah, it did. Absolutely.
Ken, yourself, when did you go in and where did you go?
January 5th, 68. That's after I got the Christmas cards in the mail. Said greetings, all right. And so I went to Fort Leonard, Missouri for basic, and then from there to advanced infantry training in Fort Polk. And then from that, I went to Vietnam, where I served with the Mobile River Reinforced 9th Infantry Division.
And what was your MOS?
11 Bravo, which is infantryman.
Okay. Ralph?
I went in September 1968. I was fortunate to do my basic training at Fort Polk, Louisiana, so they didn't have to drive me far to do my AIT, which was also at Fort Polk, Louisiana, which I'm sure Kim remembers was referred to as Tigerland.
Tigerland.
And
yes.
I remember driving, they put you on a big truck when you graduate from basic training, and you drive you up to Fort Polk, and as you drive in up to North Fort Polk into the AIT place, there was a big sign over it that said, North, home of combat infantrymen for Vietnam, in case you had any doubt where you were going. So that's where we went. I did my AIT there. Then I went to Benning for jump school, and then I went over.
And you were a paratrooper.
I wasn't real bright.
That was the extra money, the extra money that you were
Well,
going
they
to
said, well, you know,
jumping out of planes.
well, you can go there, you can go overseas. So I said, well, what's the difference? I'll go to Benning for a month, and then then I went home over.
By the time you guys were in, I was out. I was out in '62.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
but that was when Vietnam was escalating, and I wasn't there.
Right. Just
I
that,
was
yeah.
lucked out.
Yeah.
When you got over to Vietnam, what was your most impressionable thing? The climate, the heat?
Yeah, the heat. As soon as you step off the plane,
Right.
the humidity just hits you right in the
As
face.
soon as they opened the door.
Yeah, exactly.
As soon
Yeah.
as they opened the door.
And the smell, of course. I mean, that was there too. But yeah, it was mostly the heat. It was oppressive.
And
Right
as
up
an
there.
MP, what were you doing?
Well, when I got there, I was supposed to be, the rumor was I was going to be with the 615th MP Battalion, which was in Saigon, which was, I couldn't wait to get, that was great, I couldn't wait. Of course, when I got there, the Army being what it is, you're going to the 720th. I said, well, what's that? Well, it's a combat MP outfit. Oh, well, what do they do? You know? We escort convoys from Long Binh to Tay Ninh every day, like 100 miles one way, 100 miles back. 10 trucks, supply trucks, one gun jeep with 3 MPs in it, 10 more trucks, another gun, and we're just eating dust the whole way up there. But the thing is, we're just talking about how lucky some guys are, some unlucky. The 615th was involved in the Big Tet offensive, and they lost quite a few men because the embassy was attacked at the time. So I could have been very well with the 615th, and I could have been killed. So it was, even though I was mad that I got the 720th, it turned out good. It turned out good. So.
And Kim, when you got over there, what was your assignment? How did you?
Well,
how did you get
I got assigned to Company B, 3rd Battalion, 60th Infantry of the 9th Infantry Division, and I said I was with the Mobile Riverine Force. We lived on board Navy ships, troop ships, and they had floating barges that would be up next to the ship, and you'd go down the gangplank, you'd get on the barge, and you'd have small huts on there with all your weapons and munitions. You check everything, and then you disembark on landing craft and small Tango, Mike boats, Alpha boats, and then we go down the Mekong Delta rivers and make contact and then hit the beaches.
And you would actually draw the fire.
Oh yes, numerous times.
And then that was your mission, really, to draw the fire and then go in after them.
If we didn't make contact, and then we'd go in and search numerous locations. We used to use cloverleaf operations where you'd set up your command post in the center, and then your platoons would divide into your squads, and you just keep on doing circles. And if somebody made contact, then the others would come around. And then you'd call in airstrikes, artillery, that kind of stuff. And that was our main job, our goal.
Now, the Viet Cong at that time, were they organized? Were they guerrilla forces?
I would say they were kind of organized. Yes, we did find a lot of caches, weapons, where they'd have a bunker, and sometimes you didn't see a gun port in it. Well, that would draw your attention, so you start looking for a hole or something like that, or a door. And then you'd look, you finally open it up, and you'd see all the munitions that were in there. And we used to fight the NVA also, North Vietnamese Army, and they were pretty successful against us. The enemy was a formidable enemy, all right? In just 2.5 years, my unit alone sustained 83 killed in action. That doesn't include wounded. So that's one company, 83.
What was your weaponry then?
Well, we carry the M16, I carry the M60, M79 grenade launchers. We used to have snipers come in at night for us with their starlight scopes and protect our flanks. So saw a lot of combat.
Ralph?
Well, when I got in country, went through the replacement depot, the repo depot as they referred to it. You never knew where you were going to end up, and they sort of, depending on where the needs were, that's where you got sent. So I got assigned to the 1st Cavalry Division, which was an air mobile unit. We had helicopters indigenous with the unit. And our primary responsibility for almost the whole time I was there, we were working an area northwest of Saigon, north of Tay Ninh, along the Cambodian border, which were serious infiltration trails coming in from North Vietnam down through Cambodia into the Saigon area. So we were doing interdictions, mostly blocking, ambush, search and destroy. And because of the helicopters, you would run missions. They would pick you up, put you in someplace in the middle of nowhere, and you'd walk around. If nothing happened, they'd come get you and move you someplace else, constantly moving you around in the AO, the area operation, until you had contact. And wherever that contact was, whether it was small arms fire or whatever, our primary opponents, they were North Vietnamese regulars who were coming down. And we didn't see a lot of, the black pajama type thing that people associate with Vietnam. It was pretty much the pith helmets, the brown, the web gear, the Ho Chi Minh sandals, the usual thing. And it would be what they call meeting engagements mostly. You would just stumble upon them, and they would fire at you, and you would set up a perimeter, and you would call in as airstrikes or whatever. And then we did a lot of platoon-sized night ambushes. We would set up a company size. It would get dark. Then whoever's turn would go out, 500 meters or so, and set up a night ambush. And that's pretty much what we did.
And your weaponry was similar to Ken's?
Very much so. In fact, you go in first. I went into a machine gun squad myself. I was the 3rd man. You carry the ammo, and then attrition. You move up. After about 2 months, I got an M60. The gunner in front of me got hit in the face, and I was the next one up. So I picked up the gun.
Ken, you had told me a story earlier about going back to your ship. If you could relate that.
It's got to keep in mind it's a huge troop ship. Where you might have maybe 3 companies living on board the Navy ship. And it was January, or
3 companies being, 300?
around 600 people, soldiers. And then it was November 1st of 1968, and some North Vietnamese scuba divers got up to the ship and put some charges on it, and blew a hole probably as large as this whole, half this building, and killed 60 Navy and 5 from my squad. And then we had all the lights went out, and the seawater's coming in, and it's kind of like what you see in a movie on TV, and you hear a bunch of screaming, and then you don't. And then all of our gear started floating up to the ceiling, and I grabbed the guy that came out from under me, and then the red lights were on, and I didn't hear any more screaming, so I just says, well, come on, if they can make it, we can make it. So we swam over to where we thought the exit was, to go up to the next level, and go under the water, and you go through, and up we go. And then somebody grabbed me, and they were asking us, is there anybody behind us? And I says, I didn't see anybody behind us. Then it turned out that there was a guy that had a .45 from another company, and the Navy, it's part of their job is to secure the ship so it won't sink, and he was starting to shut the hatch, and he happened to have a .45 on board, and put it up to his head. Says, you don't shut it until we find out that there's nobody else coming. So I'd like to thank that guy, whoever he was, and then he shut it. So we were the last 2 out.
And you went to work right after that?
I lost my glasses, so I couldn't see. So I had a week off. Yeah, I had a week off before they got me a new prescription.
Those were the eyes that were supposed to get you out of the service?
Oh yeah,
I
with
had
the
something
black
similar.
frames,
Jim, any memorable instances with you?
Right after Tet, we resumed our convoys about 3 days later. and we would go from Long Binh down south to Saigon, through Saigon and back up to Tay Ninh again. And we went by Tan Son Nhut Air Base. And I guess the Puff, the Magic Dragon, caught a bunch of NBA regulars in a field right outside Tan Son Nhut and just mowed them down. And they were still laying there. And after 3 days, you can imagine the heat, what that smell was like and what the sight was. As we rolled through there, the carnage was unbelievable because they caught them out in the open. And you know, that what was it, a C1?
For the viewers, they Puff the Magic.
Yeah, to me, I'm in Magic Dragon, when they put a stream of tracers down, it's every fifth shot is a tracer, and it was just a steady red blast. And
Waving back and forth.
that's a sight, I'll never...
Makes that sound
It makes
distinct.
that
Yeah,
sound. That it burp sound.
I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yourself, Ralph?
I don't know, a number of things, but I think in May, around May, I don't forget the dates, is '69, we were, the battalion is 4 companies, and they rotate out of what they call a landing zone or a base camp. In the CAV, they referred to as landing zone, which was just an area that was carved out in the middle of bunkers around there, concertina wire, artillery base, and a place for the helicopters to land, and you'd get 4 or 5 days stand down out of the field. So we were on stand down when there was some concerted attacks. LZ, Jamie, Becky, and Ike were all in that area, and they all got hit by the North Vietnamese around 3 o'clock in the morning. And when they hit it, they got inside the wire, and they got one of the bunkers. They killed everybody in the bunker, and they were starting to try to jump from bunker to bunker. And the 105 battery went to 0 elevation, was firing beehive rounds. So we're in the bunker, and you hear the 105s going off behind you, shooting the beehive round, which is tearing up your bunker. And they're out there going around you, trying to throw grenades in there. So it was get killed by them or get killed by our guys. We weren't sure which one we wanted. So, you know, we did the best we could. But the next morning, they did it. It was about 19 of our guys had been killed, and 70 or 80 bodies were in there. It was a long night.
Commendations.
Just the Army commendation, I think everyone got that.
Yes.
I know, all our
Bless you,
clerks,
my son.
all our clerks got Bronze Stars though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't tell me nobody got
Just
sick.
write it up.
They wrote out the paperwork.
Yeah, the
Exactly.
clerks were good at that.
Exactly. Yeah, they got Bronze Stars. Our Army commendation was only one I got.
Ken?
My most prized possession is the Combat Infantryman's Badge.
Yeah.
That's my number one. I've gotten other medals, the Air Medal, Silver Star, Bronze Star, but it's the CIB that's I cherish the most because I relate to all infantrymen.
Right. It's a brotherhood. I go along with the CIB. You know, there's almost like a package of decorations you get after a period of time, but you don't get the CIB unless you're actually on the ground under fire for a period of time. It's not given out any other way. So to have that CIB means a lot to anybody who was an infantryman, and I feel the same way.
You make light of the Silver Star. How did you come about
I
that?
just did what I was supposed to do, and I thought I was just in the right spot at the right time. And it was when you see your partner getting shot, you get a little aggressive, you know. And I just thought I was just in the right spot, and just.
This was on the river?
This is after we had beached and we walked into an ambush. It was Christmas Eve, 1968, and point man got shot pretty bad, so I dragged him out, and then there's this bunker in front of me, and he had shot with his machine gun. I could see the flames coming out, and he hit me 4 times in my pants.
Really?
Went zip, 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 and he thought I was hit, and I just fell to the ground. My gun jammed, my M60. I cleared it, and that was the end of him. And then I got up to that bunker, and then we were able to get a couple more guys, and we started going from, like he says, to the next bunker. And then they started pulling out.
Well, it's my experience that they don't give out Silver Stars lightly.
No.
Not that I'm aware of, and the whole time I was there, I only saw one guy get a Silver Star, so I know that whatever he did was tremendous. Because, you know, you give out Bronze Stars, you got Air Medals. You get an Air Medal because you flew so many missions, you know, and even though it was in combat, and we called them air assaults. You know, so many air assaults where you had fire on the helicopters, they counted that. You get 25, you get an Air Medal, but Silver Stars they don't give out lightly.
You're being very modest, believe me. When you came back and just went back to work, looked for a job, went to school.
Yeah, I think I worked in the steel mill for a while, because I worked there before I went in, just before I went into service. And I got a job as a salesman with a tobacco company. Before I got, Mike Hinko was a friend of my wife, Kathy. I went to school with Mike Hinko's wife, Barb, and he was a policeman at the time here. So he said, well, we're giving a test. I said, you want to take it? I said, yeah, I'd like to. So, just the right place at the right time again.
Sure.
And 30 years later now, I'm retired.
Works.
Yeah, it works.
Ken, when you came back?
I had worked previously at Interlake Steel, so I went back there, and then I decided I was going to take advantage of the GI Bill and the Illinois Veteran Scholarship, so I went to Thornton Community College, and I was working construction for a bricklayers crew, and I was doing that full-time. Then I was going to night school full-time, so I just went as far as getting my associates. And then I had met some friends who introduced me to another friend, which was Jerry Brandt. And he was working on the police department here in Homewood. And he later became the chief and so forth. And he told me that they were giving a test. So I took the test and passed.
What year was that?
Oh, boy. 1974. Yeah.
Okay, I remember when I was first a trustee in '77, and I rode with the police. You were the first police officer
Right.
I'd ridden with. I'll never forget the first call was a domestic. I do remember that.
Yeah.
And Ralph, when you came back?
I came back and I almost went to university. I started at University of Illinois almost right away. And then at that time you got unemployment for the first 26 weeks you were out of the service. And I went to the unemployment office at 51st and King Drive, and I walked in there and I walked in there and there was a Chicago policeman. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Just got out of the Army." He said, "Hey, take this test." So I said, "Okay, I got nothing else to do." I took the test and I passed. Next thing I knew, I was in the academy, and here I am.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing.
No parades, guys. No parades.
Yeah.
No, there's
What kind of welcome did you have? Anything other than your family?
Well, you had the big parade in '80. When was that? That big parade? they
the one
had
here
for us?
downtown.
Downtown?
Yeah, it took about 10 years.
10
for them
years
have
to
a
get
parade.
that one. Remember that?
I didn't
82
go.
or 83?
Yeah.
I didn't go either.
Yeah, but when we first got, yeah,
I didn't
I
really
did.
want
I think it was very
Well,
good.
it was, yeah, some guys who went said it was nice. I
It
wish
was.
I had gone.
Yeah, it was.
I didn't.
But when we first got home, no, there was nothing.
No, there were no parades. And
Ralph and I were talking about it. Some guys got spit on when they got home. And
Yeah.
I didn't have that
No,
experience.
neither did I.
I didn't either, but guys told me, they were changing out of their uniforms at the airports. You didn't want to see the uniform. I didn't have a problem in the airport. I went to San Francisco, not a problem. I got to Chicago about 4 o'clock in the morning. Didn't have a problem at O'Hare. Took the limousine bus down to the Palmer House to catch the cab to go home. And got off the bus, got my bag, went down. The cabs backed up. Went to hit the cab, and the first cab driver looked at me and wouldn't take me.
Oh.
Just drove off. And so the next cab driver said he should have taken. But that was it. That was welcome home.
Go back to work.
Yeah, get on with
Something
your
like
life.
that. Have you been to D.C. to see the Vietnam Memorial?
I have not.
No.
I have. I didn't want to see it initially. I kind of had some opposition to it at the time, and it was wrong. When I was in D.C. for a conference, and I decided to go over and see it. It's a powerful, moving experience, and it's even more moving when you know some of the people that are on there. It's difficult. It's very difficult, but it's worth going to see.
They have a replica that comes around the different communities. Have you seen that one?
I got as close as 6 feet, and I couldn't get any closer. I had to get out of there.
Yeah, it's difficult.
Brought back a lot of memories.
It does.
And lo and behold, I got a phone call 2 years ago from some guys in my unit, and they were having a reunion. And I says, "A reunion?" I says, "There's nobody left, He says, "Yeah, there's a lot of us left." So I said, "Okay, I'll go." And I went to Branson, Missouri, and about 100 guys showed up, And I thought it went really well because there's other guys that thought the same thing, that there's nobody left, that they all got killed. I mean, we were getting hit pretty bad. And I'm glad I went.
Yeah.
When you have the memorial service, very touching. Very, I mean, you get very emotional, you know, but it was well worth it.
It's sometimes difficult to explain to people who've never been there, but certain things trigger things. For me, it will forever be, you know, the sound of a helicopter.
Yeah.
I can't hear it, you know, without, you know, just for a moment. It's not drastic. Just for a moment, it flashes back, and then you move on. But you hear that, especially when they're changing the pitch of the blades as they're turning. You know, you turn it.
Okay. Jim, anything that you go back to, any reunions, anything at all like that?
No, I've never been to a reunion since I've been home. To tell you the truth, so I just imagine your unit determines, you know, if you're going to have one or not. But we haven't had one.
Ken, when you go back to the reunions, do you know quite a few of the people?
I only met 3, because they all get together with group pictures. They say, all right, 4th platoon, and a lot of guys, and 3rd, well, 1st platoon, there was 3 of us. And I says, okay, guys, come on, you know, I need some help here, you know, and then we had a nice, beautiful shot of everybody that showed up. And there's a lot of people that I have all their names and everything else, and I'm hoping that they'll show up next month. We're having another one every 2 years.
That's good.
Do you have anything like that, Ralph?
Well, the first Cav has an annual reunion in general, which I went to one, and they had it here in Milwaukee a few years ago, and I just went to it just to see. And I really didn't know. I didn't meet anyone there. I was in Charlie Company's 2nd to the 7th. 7th Cavalry was a regiment within that. In fact, it was Custer's old unit.
Oh. Yeah.
and I met a couple of people there, but you know, I really haven't run across anybody that actually served with.
Would you want to go back to Vietnam now and see what it's like?
I don't think so.
Not
No.
particularly.
No.
No.
once
Some of the
I-
guys have
once
gone
was
back.
enough.
I know
Yeah.
some people go back there
Right.
and they look at some of the old sites and some of the people.
Everything's been repaired. There's no
No, there's
holes in the ground, or there's no bullet shrapnels or anything. Everything's been cleaned up by
the
the
jungle
Vietnamese.
reclaims pretty quickly.
Yeah, well, not only that, but their government over there has cleaned it up.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, and then they're a trade partner with
All
us
right.
now.
Right, naturally.
Hard to believe.
Amazing.
Hard to believe, yes.
It really is.
Well, I'd like to thank you all for being with me today. These are true Homewood heroes. Jim Barima, Kenny, Ralph, and of course you're a trustee on the board now, so you make the important decisions
Is that
here
right?
in Homewood as
Okay,
well.
thank you for that.
So, thank you all for being with me.
Thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Hello and welcome to another Here's Homewood. I'm Rich Hofeld, your village president, and today we're going to talk with some veterans, Homewood veterans who were combat veterans from World War II. We have with us Leon Smith, Bill Edwards, and Jim Cantor. Start off with you, Leon. A little bit about your family today, your children, your grandchildren, and so forth.
I have a wife, her name is Vilja, and I have 2 children, a girl and a boy, and the girl has 3 children, and my son has 2, so I got 5 grandchildren and 1 great-grandchild.
Are you retired now?
Oh, God, I retired.
What type of work have you done?
I worked in the steel industry for 43 years.
Okay, Bill, yourself.
My family consists of course, my wife Rosemary, and we had 3 children. The oldest, Bill, incidentally, spent 20 years in the Marine Corps. An unusual item with that is that his wife also was in the Marine Corps, and they both, when they came out, were lieutenant colonels. My children, other than Bill, is daughter Pat, lives in Denver. Her husband Joe, and they have 3 children. One of them, the oldest, is now teaching at Arizona State, and the other 2 are working in the Denver area. And I have 2 great-grandchildren, one of whom I haven't seen. I'm going to have to make a trip to Denver one of these days.
And of course, your son Jack, who served
Oh,
with me on the
Jack,
village
yes,
board.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
And you're retired now. And what type of work had you done?
I had been in the rendering business, Darling and Company, you may
sure.
have heard the name. And that was my career, and I guess that about covers it. Schooling, 5 years of night school, but that only amounted to about 1 year of credits.
Okay, Jim, yourself, your family.
Well, my family is 2 girls and 2 boys, and I have a boy in Georgia, a daughter in Wisconsin, and son in Mokina, and 1 daughter in Olympia Fields.
So they're close by.
And they're close by.
And what type of work had you done?
Atomic energy,
Did you work at Argonne?
Argonne Laboratory, yes.
And you're also retired now,
Oh, yes. 35 years
and it agrees with you.
with the, right.
Well, going back to World War II, Pearl Harbor was the United States entry into World War II, December 7th, 1941. What do you recall about that, Leon? Where were you? What were you doing?
I was on my way to work. What was it, about 7 o'clock in the morning or something like that?
Yes.
Maybe before that, I was on the way to work, and I had the car radio on, and I heard it, and I was pretty shocked, naturally. And by the time I got to work, everybody else knew it. And it was quite the topic of the day. And of course, what do you experience? You experience rage. Is really what you experience. You're ready to go then.
How long after that did you go into the service?
Well, I had a deferment from the company, and I took advantage of the deferment. Then all my buddies are going to the service. They said, I got to go, so I went down and enlisted in the Air Force.
And what year would that have been?
42.
So it was shortly after World War II.
Yeah.
Excuse me, after Pearl Harbor. Bill, yourself, Pearl Harbor, your recollections?
I was in high school at the time, junior in high school. I graduated in 42, so I remember that. And my only experience with Pearl Harbor was listening to the radio and when you had the chance and that sort of thing.
You graduated from high school in what year?
42.
42, and how long after that were you in the service?
May of 43, I was inducted.
So less than a year later.
Yeah. I was inducted. I tried after I graduated from high school. I was 17 when I graduated, and I applied to the Air Force, Army, Navy, Marines, and they all turned me down, and all for the same thing. I was colorblind, and I passed all of the other areas, but I couldn't do much about colorblindness other than I'd read in Reader's Digest if you ate certain foods, why you could overcome colorblindness, and that's not true.
But when you were drafted, that didn't matter.
No,
That had gone by the wayside.
No, that's right. That's
How
right.
about you, Jim?
Well, my sister and I, we were listening to the radio because they used to read the comics over the radio.
On Sunday mornings.
It's Sunday morning. This was a Sunday morning. And they broke into the program and told us about Pearl Harbor. And we didn't want to believe it at first.
And had you known where Pearl Harbor was?
No.
Even?
Never even.
Most people didn't know where Pearl Harbor was at the time it was bombed.
Right.
And how shortly after that were you in the service?
About 2 years.
And were you drafted also?
40. What's that?
Were you drafted also?
Yes.
Okay.
I tried to get in the Navy. They didn't want me, so.
Okay. When you went into the service, you went into the Army Air Force?
No, that's a funny story. I'd gone down I got the release of the company and I went down to enlist in the Air Force, and I don't know how many, there was a mess of guys down there, and I think there was only about 9 of us that passed the written part and so forth. And I had to wait a week till I was swore in. And I was in the 19th Ward in Chicago, and of course, that's North Roseland, but Beverly Hills, an affluent neighborhood, was out there. So what do? I get home from there before I can get sworn in, I'm drafted. So I ended up in the infantry with basic training in the infantry. And the only thing I can say is when I finally got out of the infantry, they finally got my record straightened out and they got me into aviation cadets.
So you went into the cadet program then?
Yes.
In the Air Force. And
Yeah.
where did you do your training?
In San Antonio, Texas.
And
then I went from there to Tulsa.
and was your training as a pilot or a,
Yeah, I was training as a pilot. I had soloed, but I got caught buzzing cattle, and things didn't go too well for that. So I finally ended up at my request. They wanted to send me to bombardiering or navigation school. My wife had come down there. We just got married in Tulsa, so they made a mistake of giving me overnight to think about what I could talk about. So the next day I had a case about how distraught I was and everything. So anyway, I told them I knew that there was a radio school in the Stevens Hotel in Chicago and the one in Scott Field. So they broke me down to corporal and then sent me to Scott Field for radio school.
that was the price you paid for buzzing cattle?
Pardon?
That was the price you paid for buzzing the cattle.
Yeah, but it all come out for the best. I think I'm here.
So you actually stayed in the Air Force as a radio operator?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Over
and we'll
and
get
over.
to that in a little while. Bill, what about you? You had gone in, you were drafted. Where did you go for training?
First I went to Camp Grant and volunteered for the parachute troops. And from there we were sent to Toccoa, Georgia. And there were 33 of us, I think, that went from Camp Grant, and only 3 or 4 were accepted. At that time, believe it or not, the parachute corps had a lot of people trying to get in. Some of them for an added $50 per month that you receive for hazardous pay. Some of the others, I guess, just thought that jumping out of a plane would be fun. I don't know. As I have indicated to you, most of us were quite young, as opposed to the regular infantry. But many of us were in the 17, 19, well, I should say 18, 19 years of age when they started. So we were at Toccoa, Georgia, and that was just mostly physical, running, long marches, and this sort of thing. There's a Mount Currahee in Toccoa, Georgia, and every evening before dinner we would run up Mount Currahee, and the last thing in the line was what we called a meat wagon, which is an ambulance, and it was all right to quit if you blacked out, but if you quit while you were still awake, you'd be drummed out of the outfit.
So how many jumps did you have there in parachute school?
Well, in parachute school, and that was at Fort Benning, and 5 jumps to qualify.
So you had your 5 jumps there, and then you were ready to go overseas?
That's right, which we did not too long after that.
We'll get to that in a second. We'll get to Jim. You had your basic and all where?
In Northern California.
Okay. And what type
we-
of training did you have?
We had for armored division, armored training.
So you were in a tank, were you?
Tank, yes, tank division. 13th Armored Division, which was the West Coast defense area that we were supposed to watch over the coastline and whatnot in case there was an invasion from to Japanese.
And you went over to Europe, though, is where
Yes.
you wound up.
After that, we went to Texas, and they took most of our personnel for the invasion of Europe. So we had to train many new fellows for armored division.
Now, when did you yourself go over to Europe?
1943. we went to, we went directly to France. The invasion of Europe was already started and gone by, and troops were moving south from the coast. And we came up behind them, and then they put us in a chateau, the Chateau Martinique in France, which was maybe about 20 miles from the coast. It held 300 soldiers. There were 300. We lived there for 2 weeks, and then they moved us forward to Saarbrücken.
Okay. And we'll go back to you, Leon. You flew from, after you had your training in Texas and all, and your radio school in Illinois, where did you go from there?
Went down to Louisiana, and that's where we got our crews formed. And then we had our training down there, for overseas training, and then we eventually flew overseas to Valley, Wales, I think is where I landed, or something like that.
What plane? What type of plane were you?
B-17.
A B-17.
Yes.
What was the crew on that? How many?
We had a pilot, co-pilot, a bombardier, navigator, 2 waist gunners. Of course, when I started over there, I was a waist gunner, radio operator gunner, and a turret, a ball turret gunner, and a tail gunner. And after we flew, possibly 6 missions, my pilot got shot up pretty bad. So then we got a new pilot, a new crew. But we flew only a couple missions, and we were made what they call lead crew, so that whenever they'd have any sorties, we would be one of the first ones. And our co-pilot would usually be a major, a colonel, or a 1-star general in one case. And
When you flew from, where was your base in England?
Nettishall, and to be up near Ely, Edinburgh, but it wasn't too far from London, about 90 miles, I think, from London. It's called, the area is called the Wash.
Now, when you flew out of England, what year was that you were doing your missions?
44.
44.
Yeah.
So most of your targets then were France, Germany.
Germany primarily.
Primarily Germany.
We have a couple of sorties were in France, where they'd had holed up and had some pockets and stuff, and we'd bomb the isolated pockets of the Germans.
How many total missions did you fly?
28.
28 missions.
Yeah.
After how many, did they have so many that they rotated you out?
Well, when I first went overseas, after 20 missions, you'd have been able to come back. Then they raised it to 30, or 28, I guess it was, and then to 30. But I would have been due to be rotated out when the war ended, though.
So you had flown 28 missions,
Yeah.
and all of them in the role of radio operator.
Yes.
And waist gunner.
Yes.
When you left in your squadrons and all, how many planes were in the air when you were on your missions to Germany?
Well, there's several hundred. Actually, you'd had 3 bomb divisions over there, and we were in the 3rd bomb division, and we would have, let's see, 3, 6, 9, 12, they would fly an echelon of 3, 3, 3, 3, and you'd have a couple of them. And so, well, I can think of like on D-Day, Battle of the Bulge, for instance. We'd flown over, we were one of the first crews to fly over, and when we come back, the sky was just black with airplanes at that time. So anything that could fly was in the air,
Sure.
even without armament.
When you initially started your missions, was there a lot of resistance on the part of the Germans?
Well, yes. At first, when we got over there, the German Air Force, the fighters would meet you and so forth, and they had a group of Focke-Wulf 190s that had yellow cowlings, and they were stationed there in Abbeville, France. And if you were flying over and you saw them, you knew you were in trouble, because they're crack pilots. But then as time went on, we got better escorts, for the missions. Our P-51s took care of the Germans pretty well.
Initially, you didn't have the fighter escorts?
Well, I was lucky enough that I didn't get, prior to my just getting over there, they had no escorts at all. But when I got there, they started getting some escorts.
Now, did you take a lot of flack there as well?
Oh, yeah.
Did you always have the same plane? Did the same plane make it through all 28 missions?
Well, no, I don't know how many different planes we had, but they got to the point where they would assign you a plane. But first of all, we had a plane, we called it our baby. We had a picture on there of a tough-looking little guy carrying a bomb. And of course, the crew had decided, because my wife had been pregnant and had a baby, that they would call it our baby. But then each mission then we got to the point where our plane got shot up so damn bad that we had to get a new one. It seemed like almost every mission you had a different plane,
but
whatever they could keep flying.
You never had to bail out? That you always were able to stay in the plane regardless of how bad it was damaged?
Yes. No, we're close, let's put it that way. I had my shoes tied on, my parachute, and I was ready to go, but we made it. We come clear back across the channel. After one time we got shot up, and we come back across the channel, and we'd lost one engine right away, and our tail was about half shot off. And we're coming across there, and then we lose another engine. And they said, well, we're just about to cross the channel, and the last one going out, we had, at the rate we were descending, we could have made another 6 miles, I think. And at the time, the pilot says we had no brakes or anything like that, so we rigged up parachutes, and a parachute, it hooked it onto the struts for the tail wheel, and then when we landed, he told us when we landed, we throw that out, we threw the parachute out, opened up, and it stopped us, and we landed on a fighter base, and so the runway was extra short, you know, compared to the bomber, so it was good.
It worked out all right.
Yeah, oh yeah, because I tore up the chute pretty bad, the parachute pretty bad, but we stopped. We all had silk scarves after that.
Yeah, and how soon after that did you go back on another mission?
2 days.
2 days later?
Yeah, I think so.
So it was just get down and head on out again?
Yep.
Bill, when you went over to Europe, where did you go first? You went to England first, I guess.
No, we went to Naples, and we were in Naples for a few days, and then we were sent up north of Rome, and that was our first combat mission. We were there for only 2 or 3 weeks, however, before they pulled us back, and of course, I didn't know what it was at that time that they were thinking of, but they were getting ready to put a big push on the Germans, so I understand. And
that would have been in 1942, would it? 40? No, excuse me. It would have been 44.
yeah, and we had the combat area in Italy, and then we pulled back and were sent to southern France. In fact, that's where we jumped. We jumped on the invasion of southern France. And
how many of you were there? Do you have any idea that were parachuting?
well, we were a regimental combat team. That when we shipped overseas, there were about 2,500 members of that combat group, and we were, by the time the hostilities ceased in Europe, the 517th had suffered 1,400 casualties out of 2,500 that were shipped overseas, which was a pretty high rate of
Was that your
casualties.
only jump?
That was the only combat jump. The only combat jump. That I
And then you pushed on into...
Well, from there, the Battle of the Bulge occurred, and we were supposed to have a rest area, but we didn't get it. We were we were sent to the Battle of the Bulge. In fact, they moved us by truck to get up there, which was unusual for the parachute troops because we didn't have any vehicles. You know, they had to dig them up from somewhere else. We were in the Battle of the Bulge. I was wounded on January 1st, and I went back to England to recuperate.
Now, when you were in the Battle of the Bulge, you were some of the reserve troops that they brought in to stop the German advance at that time?
Well, yeah, they were taking any group that they could possibly take and moving them in to the Battle of the Bulge.
Those of us who've seen Band of Brothers and all of just the cold, it must have been just,
Yeah,
just so bad. The
well, we were
conditions.
talking about cold today, and it reminded me, we were there, if you wanted to get an hour's sleep, why you probably in a slit trench that was frozen, and you were cold. I mean, many cases of feet that were in bad condition because of the blood wasn't moving properly due to the cold. And
what was your weaponry then? Were you using rifles?
well, yes, rifles. When I started off early in with the parachute troops, I was a machine gunner. But toward the end, I was with a rifle.
And the Battle of the Bulge, your recollections, the artillery barrages, was the intensity the way it was shown?
Well, I'm sure that there were places where there was greater artillery than where we were, at least up to that time, because this was January 1st, and I was wounded, and it was the shell that came in from where I don't know.
The shrapnel.
Piece of shrapnel.
So that you were shipped then back to England and then back to the United States?
Back to England, and when I recovered, they shipped me back to 517th, and they were planning and ready to go to Austria and capture some of the brains down there who had developed the V2.
The rockets?
Yeah. They developed that, and they were going to send us in to capture as many of these people as was possible. 2 days, you know, we put on our shoes and equipment, chutes rather, and our equipment. When we were preparing for that, and I don't know, it just they called it off because that was the end of the war.
Now, you were in the Army, you were in the parachute regiment, you'd been wounded, you came back to the United States. How old were you when you came back?
I was discharged from the Army 1 month prior to my 21st birthday.
So you've been doing all that and you weren't even 21.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, to this day, when I hear the people on TV and what have you refer to the Marines and others that are fighting for us over in Iraq, and I hear them calling these people kids. Well, we would highly resent that if they had referred to us in that manner.
Jim, we're winding down. Your action in combat in Europe. Where were you in Germany?
Well, we were with Patton, and we were headed towards Berlin. And we were 40 kilometers from Berlin, in Leipzig. And we had march orders that we thought we were going to go to Berlin. But we waited 3 days for march order. He turned us around, sent us back towards Austria. They wanted us to go into Austria.
That was, I think, part of the arrangement where the Russian troops were coming into Berlin.
Berlin first. We would have been first in Berlin.
Well, you were with armored the whole time?
Oh, yes, yes.
Were you inside the tanks?
Yeah, I was tank commander.
Okay.
And the best fed tank crew in the division, or maybe in the whole army. I had a couch strapped down on the back of the tank, so when we were in combat, why, we could sit up there and ride along.
And most of your targets then were other tanks, German tanks, or?
Whatever we had forward observer would see. I mean, we had 105 guns that we can shoot direct, or we can use it for artillery also.
Okay.
And that was, and the last day of the war, in the last day of the war, we didn't know it was the last day yet. We shot down a German fighter. That was the one and only fighter that we shot down.
And that was the tank machine guns?
Yeah, oh yeah, I had two. We were only supposed to have 150 caliber machine gun on our tank. Well, I had two. One of the American planes that were crashed, while we would take the guns off and then use them on our tank. And I also had a cage on the back of my tank I kept there all the time with chickens in. And we'd have fresh eggs every morning. And then when we didn't have eggs, and then the chickens we butchered for.
You always had fresh meat.
Fresh meat.
There you go. It's always being expedient when you're in the service.
Oh yes,
for sure.
You take care of yourself.
Well, we're winding down on time. We could talk all day on this.
All day. Yeah.
And we're just winding down, and I'd like to thank you all for being with us. Perhaps we'll get together again and continue forward from where we've come. And again, Leon, Bill, Jim, thanks very much for sharing your experiences with us. And we appreciate the Homewood veterans' contributions. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I am an American soldier.
I am an American soldier.
I am an American soldier.
I live the Army values.
I will never
accept defeat.
I am disciplined, physically and mentally tough.
I am a professional.
I am a professional.
I am the guardian of freedom
and the American way of life.
I am an American soldier.
I am the Army National Guard.
Defend freedom. In the Army National Guard, you can. Visit 1-800-GO-GUARD.com today.
We had concluded our interview with Homewood combat vets, and we were sitting around talking, and I thought it would be interesting to share a few more of their experiences with you. So, Leon, you were saying you were the luckiest man in the world.
Yeah, first of all, coming through everything unscathed is pretty good luck. But when we would fly a mission and we would get back, as I was telling before, that we would get a shot of whiskey before our interrogation and calm us down and everything. And then we always had a nice cot to sleep in. We always had warm food, and we also had good food all the time. I mean, good edible food, which I don't envy the doughboys one bit. I always figured the infantry boys had it tough, real tough, because I've had some friends that were in the infantry, and they related some of their experiences. They'd go weeks, months without shower or anything, you know.
But that might have been tough, but your casualty rates were pretty high too, though.
Well, I think I heard something on some program just recently. It was 80,000, I think, Air Force people were lost. And that's what I say when you read the papers now and you hear the news, and they're talking about 1 or 2 people getting killed in war. Well, you like to have compassion, actually, for the whole situation. And I'm really not for a so-called war. But by the same token, the numbers are minuscule when you think about it. Hell, you lose more people in car accidents.
But you had crew members that you lost as well.
No, I was
Just in
lucky.
your
I mean,
squadron?
I had a couple that got wounded and stuff, but then I went on and they gave us a new crew. My pilot,
Sure.
he got wounded, so I got a new pilot.
Bill, we were saying luckiest person, Leon, and you,
Yeah.
you said
Yes. Well, as I mentioned before, I was injured on January 1st. At that time, I was what they termed an operations sergeant. And, the exec officer of the battalion called the various operations sergeant to report to him, and when we did, why, he had a couple of Jeeps, which was most unusual for us to have, but he had a couple of Jeeps, and he was to take us out and see where they would have the jump off and start driving forward.
this is at the Battle of the Bulge.
Battle of the Bulge. And we were getting ready to go, and we were behind one of the stone houses that are over there. And an artillery shell came through the roof, out the side, and into the frozen earth. And as this happened, I was bending over like this to get in a Jeep, you know how low they are, and I caught a piece of the shrapnel in my leg. And I didn't know until later. I was groggy for a little while there, but when I was bending over like that, my head was almost touching the chest of another trooper, and he caught a piece in the head. And I've often thought that it was probably a piece that had hit my binoculars, which were on my belt, the back, and out the musette bag from that position, and I think that was the one that killed the fellow. So that's how close I came. There were even a couple nicks on my entrenching tool handle. So I missed some of the shrapnel.
So the shell essentially wounded you, came across you, and killed the man next to you.
And injured the exec officer, the major that was there. So that's when I left.
And that's when you considered yourself lucky.
Lucky? Oh, yes.
Yes. Jim, were you lucky over there as well?
I was. One evening, we had a bivouac area in Austria that we were for the night. We'd shut down for the night. And everybody digs their, because we did not sleep in the tank. We got out of the tank, away from the tank, and dug our foxholes. Well, he started shelling us, and this shelling kept on going all night long, and we could not dig deep enough and fast enough. So I found a door that I put over the top of my slit trench, and I got in there and still kept digging so I could almost stand up in it. Well, anyway, all the shelling kept going on all night long. In the morning, it stopped. So I got out of my foxhole to look at my tank, see what damage was at the tank. There was the ladder that you climb up into your tank was sheared off with shrapnel. And I could not find my tank crew. I was about maybe 50 yards from my tank. I could not find my tank crew, no place. I said, what the heck happened? All of a sudden, they come out from the ground. They found a bomb shelter that they stayed in all night long. But I didn't know it was there. I
So you were by
probably
yourself.
couldn't get. I was by myself, actually.
Yeah.
I was very lucky, and I was lucky throughout the war, and I never lost anybody through injury or death.
Well, you know, it's experiences that only you guys can tell. Believe me,
Is that right?
only you can tell. Do you keep in touch with anyone that you served with?
Christmas time. send Christmas cards.
Still get 2 or 3 Christmas
Yeah,
cards.
well, yeah, about half of my
But,
crew did.
yeah, that's what I was going to say. A lot
I
of
was the
my,
old man of my crew.
yeah.
I was 26 when I got out.
Oh, you were old.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah. By our standards, you were,
Yeah.
you were quite old.
Sure. But, so it's all the memorable experiences you have. Coming back, what was your reception when you came back? Any parades, anything at all?
No.
The parades that you see on
No.
television and
No.
all, the marches,
Yeah.
it was coming back individually and getting on home and joining your family.
That's right.
Yeah, I think that's a hard thing for us to see when they bring a guy back from the area or something, and the whole town's out, they're celebrating or anything like that. Hell, we just come home. We were just glad to get home, that's all,
That's all,
right?
Get on back.
After
No big parade.
after 4 years, well, that's enough.
So you were over in the service for 4 years. Bill?
Well, after the war ended, I went to Berlin for about 6 months on the occupation. I had a choice of going there in the occupation or going back to the States and get ready to be shipped to Japan. And I thought, well, I'd like to take a look at Berlin, you know.
As an option, sure, sure. Were you all concerned about going over to the Pacific?
Yes.
And you were still in the service.
Oh, yeah.
And the war in Europe ended in 1945.
Yeah, August 15th, wasn't it?
That was VJ Day. wasn't it?
That was VJ. It was April, wasn't it?
April of, I don't remember the
45.
exact date.
So that was a concern of everyone in Europe whether they were going to be going over to Japan.
In fact, we were designated after the war with Japan was over. They told us where we were to land on the invasion of Japan, north of Tokyo. And later on, I found out that north of Tokyo is like the cliffs of Dover. We would never be able to get our tanks up there.
Sure. But then you came right back to the United States from Europe then?
Yes, yes. We were on our way to go. They gave us a furlough of 30 days. And we were supposed to reassemble in California and then get our tanks and get aboard ships with them.
And Bill,
Japan.
were you still in the service then after you'd been wounded? After you had been in Berlin?
Yeah, in Berlin, I was in the service. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And,
You were then brought back?
Brought back, and then I was discharged in January, which is, say, I was 1 month less than 21 at that time.
Sure. And Leon, after the war in Europe ended, what happened with your squadron?
Well, first of all, when I came back, on the way back, the crew members are all talking about, I couldn't wait to get home so they could get a good shot of whiskey and stuff like that. I had the best drink I ever had in my life when we landed. The Salvation Army was there, and I had a glass of cold milk. Oh, that was so good. Yeah, and then, but I came back, and I was down in Chinook Field after the war till I finally was going to be sent for discharge up to Camp Grant.
So you were essentially discharged by
Yeah. Yeah.
1946, the year after the war ended,
45.
and then you entered back into civilian life
Yeah.
from that time. So did it go by fast when you were over there?
Well,
Yeah, I think reasonably so.
In retrospect and looking at it now, say it went by pretty quickly.
I was only there a year overseas. So you were there more. Yeah.
You did 28 missions in 1 year?
Yeah.
In less than a year, actually.
Yeah.
There's one incident when we were training. We took training jumps, and in this one jump, a parachute didn't open fully, and the guy was going fast, and he landed on top of another man's parachute. So the guy on top, his chute was completely out of the picture at that time, And then as he fell through, why the other chute collapsed. And the fellow who was on the bottom one was very quickly told him, pull in the chute. So he did. He pulled it in, put it between his legs, and all this is happening much faster than I'm telling it. And the reserve chute opened and brought them both down, and they were in good shape. And but while they were falling, the fellow on the bottom said to him, the fellow who was the one that fell through, the other guy said, he said, $50 if you don't drop me. And from that point on, we're always kidding him being worth only $50.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, those are all things that you remember. They all come back in time. Did it go by pretty quickly for you too, Jim?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's a time in your life that, you know, it had to be done at the time.
Right.
I don't know if there's anything called a just war, but at the time it was the thing that you all went off and did. Well, I'm pleased that you all were here today. Hopefully we can find some Homewood residents who were veterans, combat veterans in the Pacific. That was a totally different war, and I think that would be interesting to sit and talk with them as well. So again, I'd like to thank you for being with me today, and enjoyed your talking about your adventures in the war, and thank you very much for your service. Hello, and welcome to another Here's Homewood. I'm Rich Holfeld, your village president, and today we're going to talk to 3 Homewood residents who were Korean War vets: Don Benedict, Art Pellicini, and Norm Kranz. I mispronounced your name, Art. Pelliccioni. Don, a little bit about your service. Were you drafted? Were you enlisted?
I was drafted into the Korean War. And,
what year would that have been?
That was right in 52. Let's see, Korean. June of 52, I was in Korea from, I should say, I entered in January, and I was in Korea from June 52 to July of 53.
The Korean War began in 1950, June of 1950, so you had come in when the war was about 2 years old then.
About,
And Art, when did you get over there, or how did you get into the service?
Well, I was working for Ford, and I decided I wanted to go back to when I was in high school. I worked for an independent grocery, so I went to work for Jewel, and they hired me on May 29th, 1950. And in October or December that year, I was in the Army. They drafted me that quick, and so I had a job to come back to after I got out of Korea.
Now,
So,
Norm, you had been in the service prior?
Right. I enlisted in 1949, February 1st of 1949.
In the Army?
In the Army, and then took infantry training at Camp Breckenridge, Kentucky. Then I received engineer training at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and released from the active duty in February of 50 and placed in an active reserve unit, and then called back from the active reserves to active duty in October of 1950.
So you went right to Korea shortly thereafter?
15-day refresher course at Fort Lewis, Washington, and then they put us on a ship and sent us over.
So you arrived in Korea about when?
Right after Thanksgiving.
In 1950?
In 1950.
So that was less than 6 months after the war had begun?
Right.
Don, when you got there, the war had been on about 2 years, had it? And what outfit were you in there?
I was in the 45th Infantry Division, the 189th Field Artillery Battalion, Baker Battery. And
had you had training for field artillery when you were stateside?
No, I had just regular basic training for, what was it, 8 weeks. and then I had 8 weeks training for field wire school. It was my last choice. Originally, I was slated to go through another program, but then they cut it out for draftees, and I would have had to extend to go into it. It was the intelligence thing that I would have been in.
So when you arrived in Korea, you were with the field artillery?
When I arrived in Korea, I didn't know where I was going to be. I mean, they just sent us to the 145th Infantry Division, and then we were assigned there. And as a field wireman, I could have gone infantry or tankers or anything, but I ended up, you know, in the artillery.
When you were in, where was the front line then? Was it up in North Korea, or was it still in South Korea?
Well, you really have to call the front line South Korea, I guess, more or less, when we were there, because it was pretty well established at that time. You know, it's about where it is now. And so I was about halfway. It went on an angle from one coast to the other. And the furthest north, we ended up there later on, but when our outfit first brought me up there, we were around Chorwan and Heartbreak Ridge, some of the famous, you know, places where big battles were. Our division was involved in a very large one there, where they had to borrow barrels for the Quad 50s from all the other divisions because it was such a big battle.
You also, in addition to being with the artillery unit in the back, supplying the cover fire, you were also a forwarded soldier.
Yeah, I as a field wireman, I volunteered for the forward observation party because they had a field wireman on it too. So the first time I went up was field wireman. After that, they asked me if I'd if they could train me to be in the fire direction center. So I took training for that, and then I still was. The rest of them were very happy with letting me do that.
So did you do that quite often?
Every month.
And you were directing the fire as to where it should be going?
Well, yeah, we got the information where it was needed, and then we directed it to take place, you know.
Sure. Art, when you arrived in Korea, when was it?
1951.
And you
52.
went there as an MP?
I went there as an MP, and I was signed. I was already signed to the 77 Deuce MP Battalion when I got to Korea. So all I had to do is find my company, which was Company B, which was stationed in Busan. Now they had Company A, C, and D, but they were in different phases of the railroad. And our main job was to supply Don with all the ammo he needed and the clothes he needed. Everything he needed was supplied by train. And we guarded anything that moved by train. There was an MP on there and a couple ROK soldiers. And
ROK is Republic of Korea.
Republic of Korea. And we would take the train out of Busan, and we'd stop at Daegu, and we'd stop at Seoul.
So you were moving north?
Moving north all the time. And the only thing we had to watch for was pilferage and sabotage. And that was the two main things. So when our trains left Korea, or left Busan, we had to make sure there were no one on that train. And since there was no other transportation really comparable to the trains, they all tried to get on this train going north. And that was our biggest job down in Busan, is keep these people off the train. So Richard, you got a lady is crying, she wants to see her son in Seoul. You're not going to hit her on the head to get off that train. So what do you do? And that was part of the police work and the things we had to do. Now, we didn't hurt anybody, but we had to get them off that train. We didn't know who was sabotaging. I got to tell you an incident. There was two boxcars, and I told the people come, I want to go on, you know, and they're talking in Korean to me. I said, get in that boxcar over there. Oh, thank you, thank you. I got everybody going to this boxcar, see? So all of a sudden the train pulls out. That boxcar stays there. And we're halfway down the road. And I seen all these fists. But I did it diplomatically. I tried to, you know, say, hey, you know, you just cannot come on this train. And so that's one of the things we had to watch for. And going on the way up, like I was telling you about the troop trains, we had that chicken wire mesh, and I thought to myself,
over the windows.
Over the windows, and I thought, oh my God, what kind of flies do you add here? But what these people would do was throw hand grenades into the cars that the troops were on. And then I thought to myself, wow, this is, you know, a situation where you have to be on your toes all the time. But like I say, you don't know, just like in Iraq, you don't know who your enemy is.
Sure.
And how do you tell a North Korean from a South Korean? They're all lovely people. I fell in love with the country, to tell you the truth, because I traveled from Busan to Incheon to Panmunjom to Seoul, I saw the whole country.
Norm, you had come in at the very first stages of the war, essentially. When you landed in Korea, where did you land?
Well, I actually landed in Busan.
Again, at the far south end.
Yeah, and then I was supposed to be assigned to a ordnance supply depot in Busan because of my MOS, as you know, that I had as a carpenter in the engineers from my first training when I was in the first year. Then, because of the casualties and everything, and the Chinese and everybody coming down, they reassigned a number of us and just put us into the infantry, and that's how I became a member of the 1st Cavalry Division.
You had volunteered, no doubt.
I didn't volunteer.
The Army volunteering, you,
right,
you, and you.
Right. Right.
And you hooked up with an infantry outfit then?
Right, right.
What would that have been?
Well, that was, when I got there, the company commander said, what am I going to do with a carpenter in infantry platoon or a company? So he said, go with my driver, get wood for my stove for a couple of days here. So, but then he called me up and he said, you're going to be assigned to the 4th platoon as an ammo bearer for the 60mm mortars. And that's where you carry a bag with so many shells and, you know, to supply the gunner and the assistant gunner with ammunition for 60mm mortars. And that was basically my job until I had gotten hurt.
You were wounded then, how long after you had been there?
On February 14th, 1951.
About 3 months after you had
I
been
got
there.
hurt. And then...
that was a hand grenade?
Yes, a hand grenade. They were trying to take we were trying to take this hill, and the command territory there, I mean, for view, you know, and they were just lobbing them out of their trenches. And so that's how that happened.
You never saw it coming?
No, no. I just saw it rolling before it went off.
Then where were you evacuated to?
Well, the first stop was a MASH hospital, then a plane to Busan, and on a hospital ship. A couple of days later, on another plane to Japan. And then I went to a station hospital in Sendai, Japan, and Omiya Station Hospital, and then back to Korea.
And did you go back to the same unit that you had been with?
Yes.
And what did you do there then? Essentially the same thing?
Well, yes, I was a little like an ammo bearer, but then they made me a platoon runner and then a company runner. And, you know, besides, because of my, I mean, was my job there for a while. Then there was an officer, another man, and myself that were chosen to be on a detail from the battalion to the engineers in building Phase Line, Kansas. Of course, that came in June of '51.
And what was that?
Well, they were building, you know, the Chinese had come through, and naturally they charted all the roads and every positions and everything. So now these engineers were building new fortified bunkers, and
This is after the Chinese had retreated.
right, and then they were, and new escape routes, roads that weren't charted. If by chance, you know, they ever did come down and they had to evacuate, they would be traveling roads that the Chinese didn't know necessarily existed. We had superior air quality, or superior air
support.
Yeah, right. And so you didn't ever see hardly ever see any Chinese planes or anything, you know.
Sure. So you're far too modest. You didn't mention that you also received a Purple Heart and the Combat Infantryman's Badge.
That's right.
As a result of your combat. Don, everyone that's been in Korea remembers the weather. What's your recollection of the weather?
Very, very cold in the wintertime and hot and rainy. They had some very heavy rains just before I got there. A lot of the bunkers all got caved in, and so we had to redo a lot of the bunkers and everything. But they were warm. You know, we had warm clothing. And
the terrain, was it similar to what we have in the Midwest? Was it hilly?
Well, it's very, very hilly. You couldn't, the expression was you couldn't take 3 steps without going up or downhill. And that was about it.
I can believe that.
And so very cold winter, warm summer, kind of like back home almost.
Well, you have a picture there underneath your notes, and if you could hold that up for the camera, a picture of you when you were over there.
Yeah.
There's very little change in you. Since that time, I hope the folks at home can see that.
20 years old.
That was an M1, I presume?
Yeah, carbine. Mm-hmm. It's my weapon, and this was on a bridge that had been built by the GIs on the river, and you could, and I was just standing there and got my picture taken by a buddy of mine, and the smoke screen you see in this picture is around our whole outfit, so that the enemy could not see us during the daylight, you know, to know where to pour in the artillery.
You had said off camera that some of our own friendly fire thought that was a marker.
Well, I guess that whether that's what they thought, but the Navy planes bombed us, and fortunately they didn't hit anything except close enough by for the shrapnel to fly right in front of our bunker. There was a big piece of shrapnel that hit.
And in your other picture there, if you would like to hold that up, those are the howitzers.
The outfit I was in was a Baker battery of the 189th Field Artillery Battalion. So we had 155 howitzers, and they were the longer range weapons. The 105s, they had many more of the 105s than we did, you know, of the 155s. So when I was a forward observer, I would be looking for targets, you know, and during attacks, relaying the information that was needed, you know, for the guns.
Sure.
You know, where to fire and everything.
Norm, when you were up in the front, did you hear those shells going over?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because you'd hear the boom, boom, boom. Boom. Then a little later, you'd hear this, you know, as they came over. And then you'd hear them blow up, you know, in front of you. So we knew what they were doing back there.
And you remember the weather over there as well?
Oh, yeah. Rainy, cold, you know, I mean, it was, the rain would drive you crazy because during the rainy season, whenever you'd walk, especially in the front, you know, you'd walk and it was all mud, and you'd get so full of mud you couldn't hardly stand it, and get the mud off your feet, but it's still raining, and you walk again a little bit more and you'd be back in the mud, and you'd think you're going to lose your mind. And in the winter, with the cold and the snow, the weather was really one of the worst things as far as the infantry is concerned.
How often did you have hot meals?
Well, they tried to get that up to us, you know, but whenever we were in a position that was safe, but otherwise you'd have to eat, you know, sea rations or whatever else was there. But whenever you were in a rest area or in a safe area, then they would try to get you some meal, at least maybe one a day or something, you know, sometimes. But you'd have to leave your position to get down to get it. And that wasn't when you were really in the, you know, when they were really in fight or in the combat.
Coming back, you get a shower once a week? Not that often.
Not even once a month.
Yeah. And when the enemy was in retreat, were you in fairly close pursuit?
When they were in retreat?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we looked for them a long time.
You moved quite a bit.
Yeah, we moved quite a bit, and then, but I mean, they were looking for them at different times, you know, and because it seemed like all of a sudden they'd disappear. So then they put a command post out, and I remember the one time we were in a command post and it was in a perimeter of just our battalion or whatever it was, and we'd leave at night, and they would go on marches and to try to make contact with them. And but we couldn't, you know, we didn't find them until later. But I didn't like that, because you're 5 miles out in front of the others in an outpost and then looking for them.
As you remember, it was most of the fighting during the day or at night?
No, at night. Night, and as far as, and early mornings, you know, they would come.
Using the cover of darkness.
Yeah, right. And, you know, we were usually in attack in the daytime.
And you depended on Don's artillery for your cover.
Well, them and the superior air power.
Sure.
And, right, and the ships were, you know, some of the ships were firing in from the water, in, you know, the Navy ships.
Sure. The weather, you chuckled when they were talking about the weather.
We didn't wear ponchos, but if you can see this picture here, this is the Korean Memorial, and it's whoever designed this or whoever made this memorial had to be a Korean vet, because they're all in ponchos. So that's one of the outstanding things that I remember about this memorial. My granddaughter took the picture. She went, I didn't go yet, but she said they were all in ponchos. I said, that's the way we were. And when we were on the, and then boxcars, they weren't cabooses now, these were boxcars, and they had holes in them, and we'd be on that, and they'd be going, like I say, we'd go from Tucson all the way to Seoul to Panmunjom, and it was cold. But the thing that I remember the most is when we'd stop at Daegu, which was our first stop, there'd always be children there, and they'd be hungry. And I remember the first time going out, I gave my sea rations, and my buddy says, what are you doing? And I said, I want yours too, because there's some more kids out here. So we had these kids their sea ration. Then we got to Seoul. So the next time I took the train out, they were in six packs, and I took about 5 or 6 with me. And the sergeant says, you don't eat that much. I said, just give me the boxes, would you please? And every stop we made, we gave these sea rations to these children, because they were coming back. See, going, like I told you, they could not ride that train. Coming back, get on the train, because what are they going to do with an empty boxcar? Sure. So all the children, or anybody that wanted to go back, put them in the empty box. In fact, I remember one time we were coming back with just gondolas, and they were all in them gondolas. And it wasn't warm in there either, but it was transportation back. And a lot of times I'd buy apples, because we couldn't see, Richard, we could not eat anything that was grown in Korea. And I think, I'd like to tell you why, but I think you know why.
Because of the fertilizers.
Yeah, well, anyway, but I figured I'd get these apples for these children if I didn't have all the sea rations, and they really appreciated it. And I don't know where all these kids, well, they're coming from the north,
well,
you know.
Well, you
I really felt...
You really enjoyed the Korean hospitality, the Korean culture.
I loved the people. I really did. And
you've kept that up. You have a plaque alongside of you when you had gone to the Korean church over in
Yes,
Flossmoor.
right.
And you want to highlight that? That's right next to you. Perhaps you can show that
Well,
to the audience. Those are some pictures of you and some other Korean War vets who had been over there at the Korean church. When was that?
October 1st, I'll never forget the date, because really the war ended on that day, October 1st, 2000.
Okay.
And they invited all the Korean vets to their church.
Okay.
And we got there, and they had a little mass for us, or services, they call it services. Then they fed us, and it was about 6 o'clock before we got out of there. And all you see here is the Koreans in their native dress, and they danced and they sang. So at the end of the program, like I said, the war ended that day for me. At the end of the program, I made that little thing about, I was so happy to see so many happy Korean children. And I said, I remember giving them sea rations. So all of a sudden, out of the audience, here comes this middle-aged man towards me. I said, oh my God, I hope he was not in that boxcar that I had left behind. And no, he came up to me and he gave me a big hug, kissed me on the cheek, a little tear coming from his eye. And he says, I remember the sea rations.
How wonderful.
Today he is a professor at Chicago University.
Wonderful.
That day just completely ended, completely. Sure. But it was cold. It was cold. The weather was cold.
Don, when you were over there, did you get to sample the local food, the kimchi and any of that?
When we got there, they put us on a train, and we went right to the division that we were going to be in, and for assignment. And so we had no contact with the civilians. We did have a few South Koreans attached to our outfits, though, that we lived with. But as far as food, I never got to go to Seoul or any place. I mean, going there or coming back.
Now, when you left there, you came back to the States by ship, naturally.
Yeah.
In those days, that's what was done. Where did you land back in the States?
Seattle, Washington, and that's where we left from. And we came back, and since the war ended, while we were on our ship, almost back, we were just a few days out of our 14 days. I think we had about 3 more days to go when the war ended in Korea. So we got quite a reception when we were getting off the ship.
And how long were you in the service after that?
Then I stayed in the service to let's see, what was it? Refer to my notes here. I was in Korea from June of '52, July of '53, and then I got out of the service in like November.
Okay.
I spent just a few months guarding prisoners in an MP company in Camp Crowder, Missouri.
Norm, the Korean War was a UN action. There were a lot of other troops there as well.
Yeah.
The Turks were there, the Greeks,
yeah.
Australians.
Yeah.
Did you have any contact with any of the other troops?
Not really, not, I mean, they were on our flank or we were on theirs, you know, I mean, stationed with them. But they had different rules than we had. The Turks would have fires at night, and you know, which we didn't dare have at our, and it just seemed like if the Chinese and them didn't want to bother with them. But no,
they were known as ferocious fighters.
Yeah, but there was Canadians, and you know, it was a UN that was fighting that war, and I just remember that was good to see all of the other people, the other nations.
Did you all come in contact with any of the other troops?
I did.
Which?
Quite a few, oh yeah. Because they would take troop trains. I would take troop trains.
Oh, sure.
Up to the, and the best dressed, or I shouldn't say the best dressed, but what fascinated me was the Aussies, the Australian. They had those cowboy caps with the side up. That was really sharp. And I asked one of the guys, says, "You think I could get one of those caps?" He said, "Sure, try to get it off of me." But then after the trip was over, he come over and he handed me his cap. I just loved it. It was just something. Sure. And the British troops, and like he says, the
the Turks and that, they don't pull their sword out unless they draw blood, you know.
That's what I had heard.
Fierce they are.
That's what I had
yes.
heard. Well, when you had come back, MacArthur had been replaced, and you said
Yes.
you were involved at West Point.
At West
with
Point,
General
yeah.
MacArthur.
Yes, with the 716th MP Battalion. In fact, they've,
Well,
that
that
was an
was-
honor guard. And this is the Catholic chapel, and then right here is the honor guard that I was in with the 716th MP Battalion. And it was, when he came back to make that speech, Old Soldiers Never Die, they must have had, I couldn't say how many, I wouldn't even begin to guess, but there were more cars than they could handle. And so they brought up a whole battalion of MPs, and I was happy to get there. And
Sure.
if you ever want to see a beautiful part of the country, you take Highway US 9 up the Hudson River, which goes right to West Point. Most beautiful country on the sea.
Okay. Again, our casualties in Korea were over 36,000. It went from approximately 1950 to 1953. I'd like to thank you all, Don, Art, Norm, for sharing your experiences with the audience. Thank you for being
Thank
here
you.
on Here's Homewood. Hello, and welcome to another Here's Homewood. I'm Rich Hofeld, your village president, and today we're going to talk with World War II combat vets from the Pacific. A few months back, we spoke with combat vets from the European theater. My guests today are Ray Thomas, Emil Kirsten, and Mike Jacobs. Thanks for being with us. The start of World War II, Pearl Harbor. Where were you then, Ray? What do you remember?
I was setting pins in the Homewood bowling alley. And I was come out, and they said, you know, we got attacked. And a friend of mine, Glenn Edwards, he was in the bowling alley at the time, and I rode home with him. And he later joined the Marine Corps in January that year. He just got carried away. But I was only 16 at the time, so.
Where was the Homewood bowling alley?
Just south of the restaurant.
Ridge Road?
Yeah, Ridge and
Just south
Ridge
of Three
Dixie.
Brothers there.
Yeah, Three Brothers, just south. The next one was the bowling alley.
And you were born and raised in Homewood?
Yes, I was all my life. Yeah.
And where were you, Emil?
Emil, well, that's me. It's a funny thing. I was with my brother, because I was young like this young gentleman, and my brother Ed was at the Comiskey Park where the Bears were playing the Cardinals. And his Packard, my dad's Packard, broke down. He calls up and says, get me out of here. I can't get the car. So I go with my brother Shorty, what's his name is Steve. We had to drive up there to get the doggone Packard going, but we did not see any of the Bears game, which was at Comiskey Park. And it's a funny thing. Later on in life, Shorty, Steve, tried out for the Cardinals. So that's where I was.
And you found out about Pearl Harbor when
Oh,
you
yeah,
were
when they announced it on the announcing thing.
Mike, what about yourself?
After church on Sunday morning, I came home and dressed down because I don't see that today, but years ago everybody dressed for church. You don't see that today. They go in dungarees. But my mother asked me, where are you going to go? This is after church. I said, we're going to go to Temple. Well, Temple was our pool room. And it was like, that was what we called it. That's where I was when it happened.
And you got the word when you were
Yeah, we were
down
playing
there.
pool when it happened. We'd play pea pool.
And this was on a Sunday afternoon?
Sunday,
6 o'clock.
Sunday, I got it like 7, 11, no, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock.
Somewhere around there.
Around that time.
And then how long after that did you join the service, Mike?
I didn't get in until 1943, March. And I was in there 43, 44, 45, 46.
And you joined the Marines?
I joined the Marines, yes.
How did you choose the Marines?
My friend Tom Cremonesi and I decided that we're going to win the war, I guess. And we did win the war, no doubt about it. But he passed away some time ago on a blood clot arrangement. A very sad thing. But we had gone to grammar school, high school, and joined the Marine Corps, but got separated. Then in Kwajalein, when I was shipped to Eniwetok, they had amassed the 5,000 some odd ships to make the Iwo push. We didn't know what they were doing at the time. They don't tell you what. But as such, I knew he was there because I knew the group that he was with, and they were going to be shipped to a specific Eniwetok.
When you joined the Marines, did other family members join the service as well?
No, I have 4 brothers. One was a Navy ensign who was a oil tanker engineering officer until they ran out of people that got enough points to go home, and they didn't need the tanker anymore, but they did need landing craft tanks, LCT, sorry, to ship all the various bypass island people back home. There were Japs in Marshall Islands that were never in the war. They just got bypassed.
So you had one brother that was in the Navy?
Yeah, I had one brother in the Navy. My brother, I have 4 brothers. My brother John was an airplane driver and got to be at O'Hare. And because at the time the transition from prop to jet was such that if you couldn't fly a jet, you didn't get flight pay. And all the colonels and generals wanted flight pay. So he was an instructor.
You had a brother that was in the Navy, a brother that was in the Air Force?
And 2 more brothers that were in the infantry.
So everyone in your family was in the service?
All of us, yeah. We won the war at home.
Of course. Emo, what about yourself? You joined the Marines also?
I graduated in 43 from St. Rita. And then also next week I got the selected service letter. You have to report for it. You got that one too. Report to the selected service. And I went down, I had choice, Marines, Navy, Air Force. And I said, well, let me go to Marines. I'm going home. So I went to Marines. And then in December, I went to San Diego. Now my 2 brothers said, why'd you do that? Why don't you get an easy job like the Air Force? Because Ed was in a repaired airplanes. He ended up in China, you know, where he flew over the hump and he was repairing the wings. And my brother Shorty, he went over to Europe and was there sort of reserve. So I went to San Diego where I learned to be a radio operator in the front lines. And then they shipped me to Maui to join the 4th Marine Division.
And what year would that have been?
Let's see, that's 43 there, right around that age.
And Ray, how did you get in the service? Did you enlist? Or?
I was drafted.
Same paper I got.
Yeah.
And did you have a choice?
Yes, I turned 18 in January, and I got my notice from the draft board. And I went down to Chicago, and they said, like he did. And I said, well, I'll take the Navy. And so on the day I graduated, because I had a deferment till I graduated. So after I graduated, that day I got my notice, and it'll be about 62 years today that I went in downtown to the induction center. And there was about 12 of us standing there, and we were all from the Navy. And the guy says, we need 2 Marines out of this group. And nobody volunteered. So when I put my paper down, and the guy takes a stamp, puts the Navy one on, and he stamped it U.S. Marine Corps. And I was on my way.
Remember years ago, they didn't select like he did. Yeah. You know, they didn't. If you want to be Navy, Army, they checked their records. We need a Marines, and all the guys had to be Marines, or we need the Navy.
You could volunteer, but they volunteered me, and me and another fellow from Stager. We were volunteered.
And where did you go for your training then, Ray?
I was a Hollywood Marine. San Diego. Yeah, I had to bring that up.
And you had done the same thing, Mike?
Yeah, because there was Parris Island, which was on the East Coast.
We don't want Parris Island.
They didn't care for us.
Now, did you have other family members that were in the service?
Yes, I was the 6th of, I have 7 brothers, and I was the 6th one to go in. I had three brothers in the Navy, 1 in the Army, and 1 in the Merchant Marines. And my brother in the Army, he was captured, and he was a prisoner of war for 2 years in Germany. And my brother Farrell, and he lived in Homewood up until he passed away. And it was quite a thing that.
Well, the commonality you all have, your entire families were in the service.
Well, you had no, right? You had no problem there. We had, I mean, to come up, and if you're old enough, then come on, you got to come in. You got to go in.
Yeah, when I was 18. And
well, you're sitting at the bar and talking about.
You all went over to the Pacific after your training.
Oh, yeah.
Did your training prepare you for any of that type of action?
Yes.
Yes.
So you were well trained, and you knew fairly well what to expect when you were
I
going
went
over
to
there.
ordnance school in Oklahoma, and cannon artillery school in Aberdeen Proving Grounds Army School, and then they put torpedoes on a B-25. I was in a B-25 squadron. And we practiced, I didn't, I was ordnance on the ground. They practiced shooting torpedoes at, they didn't practice with live ones, they had cement torpedoes. And from the pictures they could tell where they were with that.
So you all had similar training. You're all essentially riflemen, infantry. You're all trained for that.
You were in boot camp, correct?
If you went to boot camp, you were a rifleman.
Yeah.
And that's why we still know how to make beds, right?
Did any of your friends from back home, were there any of them in your outfit?
No.
So you met people there in your outfit.
Yeah.
And then when you joined your outfit, did you ship out with the outfit, or did you join an established outfit that was already in the Pacific?
Well, myself, I joined. I shipped out with Maui, and I joined the 4th Marine Division in Maui, which was forming at that time. Remember you were talking about the ships?
Yeah.
That's where we were practicing landing. And where did you go?
We went. I left San Diego in December of '44, and we went to a little island called Papuvu, and I replaced the Marines. There was a skirmish at Palu Island.
Yeah.
Palu. And I was replacement for them, and we were down in the South Pacific. We even made a mock landing on Guadalcanal, for practice of the jungle warfare. So we really didn't know where we were going at that time. It was just a thing of, but we did practice, and I was in the machine gun group. I wasn't a gunner. I was just a carrier of. I carried.
Water cooled?
No,
in my case,
I carried them. I carried them 20 pounds.
Marine Air Group. Marine Air Group was Marine Air Group 61. So there was Marine Air Group Squadron 611, 612, 613, 614, and each of the squadrons was 15 B-25s. And ours was the one that had the cannon in the nose, a 75-millimeter cannon in that nose. That's why they sent me at Aberdeen Proving Ground.
So when you went into the Pacific, what island did you go to initially?
The first one, Kwajalein. Well, Roy Namur, well, that's a whole group of Marshall Islands. And we talk Majuro.
And we had already taken those islands.
Yeah, those were taken like 2 months ahead of time. At the time, they were still pushing bodies into holes. You'd find some where you'd dig them out and put them in a big hole.
All right. Were you involved in any landings?
I was.
Yes.
What was your landing?
Okay, when we landed on Iwo Jima, we had we heard about other landings like Norman, oh my God, but we landed there and for about 2 hours, nothing happened, and everybody's standing around and bringing them material. Now the Japanese were dug down 4 stories down, and then they come up with their big guns and blew the heck out of us on the beach and killed more men. They were sinking ships out in the sea. And there was no way to go but to dig down and go deep. And then from that time, we know we had an enemy to fight.
And how long were you on Iwo Jima, do you remember?
Oh, about 2 months.
And just kept pushing in.
See, I was the radio man for the rocket department, rockets, remember them? And I had to go on the front lines and went to my lieutenant and tell where the rockets were hitting. And, well, one unfortunate thing, the Japs had orders, remember that? Never shoot a enlisted man, had to aim at an officer. So I said, got the orders, said when first when we knew where to land, I handed the radio, And he would have to give the order because he's a lieutenant. I couldn't. So I handed him the radio. As soon as I handed him the radio, boom, he got it right in the heart. Not in the heart, but in that area.
Got it.
So my
Chest.
sergeant had to take over the outfit. But you didn't know where the heck they were coming from.
And you were on there for about 2 months, you said?
We
Right.
made our landing on Easter Sunday, April 1st, 1945.
On Iwo Jima?
No, on Okinawa.
You were on Okinawa.
Yeah, and we come through, and we were to take over the landing fields, the airport, the airfields, and we went across, and we went no resistance. There was us, the 1st Marine Division, the 6th Marine Division to our left, and the 10th Army Division was to our right. We were going through, and we were to go north and capture whatever's up there because it was more jungle up that way, and we were more of a jungle fighter than a. But then the 10th Army, they went to the south and they got big resistance. But we did have the airfield and that captured within the first day, and we just kept. And then we went up north and went no problem. And then we got up there, and then they called us to go down and relieve the 10th Army, which was pushed. They ran into a lot of trouble because I don't know who figured, but they figured they might be north, but they were south. All the Japanese, they were in caves, and there's a lot of burial caves and other things that the resistance was there.
Remember
and
when
we just
From a timing standpoint, was Iwo Jima first? Were you on Iwo Jima before Okinawa?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so when Okinawa was finishing up, where did you go?
No,
Excuse me, when Iwo Jima was finishing up, did they ship you out?
No, when Iwo Jima, when I was on there, now he was in charge of, and he's not in charge, but the planes flying over Iwo Jima to bomb Japan.
Yeah,
and then, right, the one who was carrying the atomic bomb was supposed to fly over, and they were coming back, and they were getting crash landing. I don't know what the B-29 was.
B-29.
B-29. So when we took the airfield on the Iwo, maybe I'm talking too much, I'm sorry.
No, you're doing fine.
When we crash landed, one of them crashed, he jumped down and kissed the first Marine he saw.
Yeah.
But when we
Was
got
that you?
No.
But his outfit.
He didn't shave.
As soon as we got the airfield, his planes came in. Remember?
Yeah.
They came in and took the airfield over so they can protect the bombers going over to Japan.
Yeah.
No, that was.
So our group would fly around the area as a patrol group because the Jap submarines were still great submarines, and they could come in and take all the patrol boats out. So the B-25 was known as the patrol plane for that area.
And after you finished up in Iwo Jima, Emil, where did you go from there?
I was supposed to join with his 1st Marine Division. We were supposed to after Okinawa hit Japan, the first wave. We were the 4th Marine Division. We were the first wave that hit Japan. Thank God.
Harry took care of that. Harry Truman.
And I ended up in
Harry Truman's our hero.
You're darn right.
Yeah.
He brought us all back.
Then I ended up in Tsingtao, China. You were in China too, didn't you?
Tsingtao.
Qingwandao,
Yeah.
Tencent, whatever, China.
So they shipped you from Iwo Jima to China?
Yeah. No, we went to, where did we go? I might have been, my mind is so short.
Yeah.
But they need occupation service back there, okay? And if you had only 43 points to go home, you left, right?
Yeah.
Right? You
I
went
don't
to
know how many points.
occupation.
I didn't
forget
have
the
enough
point.
points.
So all of you wound up in China, did you?
I didn't go there, no. I
okay.
had enough points to not go. I went home.
Oh, you went
Yeah, he
home
was
after
older.
the war was
Yeah.
over?
Yeah, he's older than
Now,
us.
the war was over then in 45, and
Yeah.
then you all went on to China with your outfits.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what were you doing in China then?
Well, mostly, go ahead.
We were up on the Manchuria border, and we would stand there with a bunch of Chinese. We don't know what we were doing, but we couldn't talk to them or nothing. We didn't understand them.
Sure you
And then we
could.
did take, we'd go to the shore there, and they would bring in these ships with Lend-Lease, you know, the Americans, and
The
we
merchant
watched,
ships.
yeah,
Merchants,
and we watched them unload, that there wasn't too much pilfering going on or anything like that.
So more of
And-
an occupation type
Yeah,
of thing.
we were occupation, and
Mostly,
And you did the same thing?
yeah,
Emil?
mostly guarding the embassy and American people that were in China and, whatever we had there.
Yeah.
And so we can put a force there to show we're
Yeah.
in China.
Then we would ride the trains from the coal fields to because they were still fighting over there, you know. the Chinese communists against the
The
nationalists.
nationalists.
And they'd, the train go by, they'd stop fighting, we'd go through, then they'd start fighting again. So it was just a big, but we had...
Now, your time with the Marines, the action you had seen, you were on Okinawa.
Yeah, I was on Okinawa.
What do you remember most about it in memories and thoughts that you have about it, friends that you had over there? Anything stick out in your mind?
No, just that it was just a rough stretch of my life that, because we were near the end before, then I got, one morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, we went across this rice field. We couldn't get across during the day, so we went across at night, and it was into the mountain, and we got there, and they hadn't expected us, and they were out, and here was the American troops, so we were all bogged down, and they were up. The Japanese didn't even know we were there, and because they got up for morning or whatever, and so then we were there for 2 days with no supplies. The only thing we had was the tanks would come across the rice field and this and that, and then we would have to have airdrops. Our food, our supplies would be airdropped to us, and before they could get more troops in. And so that's when I got injured, was during an airdrop. A bag of phosphorus grenades exploded, and it burnt me in the back. And
glad you said back.
Yeah, yeah. But otherwise.
And then you were hospitalized from there?
Yeah, I went to the hospital.
But
we went out in a tank. They strapped us to the tanks or some, and load us underneath, and we would go out. That's the only way we could get out. So then after that, my war in Okinawa was over. But we stayed there till, it was right around June 14th of 45 that I got hurt. And then we stayed in Okinawa to September, then we left for China.
Emo, your most memorable things about Iwo Jima?
Well, the most memorable, I said it's not memorable, my officer, but at the end there, we were securing the island, and then all you see is 300 Japanese get on top of a mountain, like a ocean, and they'd start jumping off rather than surrendering to us. They would be jumping off all over the place.
Suicide.
Yeah, just suicide. Yeah. Now, we lost 2,000 men up there on that just one 2-by-8 mile island. And they're still out there buried. And when you walk through that field, and just glad your name is not on one of them things.
Yeah.
Mike, when you relate to your service?
Yeah, relative to Iwo, going down on the beach, they'd have 20, 25, 30 guys lined up in bags going home. They were our casualties. And some years later, I read where we lost some 25,000 men in the month or so that we were there. However, they lost somewhere around 100,000 men, and nobody ever counted the ones that were buried in the tunnels that we just blasted and buried. We would pour gasoline down them.
Remember they used to flamethrowers on them?
Flamethrowers and gasoline right down them tunnels.
Because they wouldn't surrender.
They wouldn't surrender or come out, and they had the guns down there.
Buddies that you made there, friends and all, do you keep in touch with them today? Do you have any contact with anybody?
No, I have no contact with nobody.
No one?
No.
That's the only contact I have.
Did you ever, had you ever after you left there?
No.
No, not really?
No.
I did, yes. Yeah. About 20 years ago, they found me. I didn't know I was lost, but we have a group that gets together every 2 years. And if it's not too far, I don't want to go to the West Coast or East Coast. There was one in Peoria. There was another one in Texas. I made about 3 or 4 of them with my wife, and pretty nice. You don't hardly recognize them. The kid that you saw is 18 years old is 60, 70 years old, and he's very different.
Remember, you stayed the same, right?
Yeah, I stayed the same. I've never changed.
How many years ago this was?
Sure. We were talking back in 44,
yeah.
45.
Yes.
Yeah, 62 years ago.
Yeah.
An 18-year-old kid going nowhere.
Went by pretty quick.
The furthest I ever went was probably Crete. That's further south I ever went.
Well, you were born and raised in Homewood.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you really were in the Homewood area the whole
Yeah,
time.
all the time. Yeah, we might go to Crete.
Yeah, we're all out of there by over 60 years.
Yeah.
As far as your thoughts on the service, you did what you had to do at the time.
Yes, we did.
Anything else that you can think of as far as, you know, what your family thought of when you were going, the letters you had from home? Your brothers, did you keep in touch with them when they were
All
in the
the time,
service?
yeah, all the time.
You were able to write with
Yeah.
one another?
When each of us needed some money, we would each send them money if they needed it. But you never know what he needed it for. Never told you, I need a couple bucks, so you send him money.
You know, at that time, being so young, 19, 20, you just want to get your,
Yeah,
get
go
out
on
of there and
home.
get home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same way with us. It was just, we had contact with my mother and that. But my brothers, you know, well, the one was in prison camp.
Yeah.
And the others were in the Navy and
But your
stuff
mother
like
was happy to see you when you got home.
Yeah, we all come home. That's pretty good.
Yeah, what was it like coming home like that? What kind of a reception did you get?
Just got off the train and walked over to bowling alley, and someone drove me to my house.
And didn't you go to the bar
Out
first?
No, I wasn't old enough.
I
When
know.
you came out of the service, you weren't 21?
No, I
No,
was
couldn't
only
get
20.
drinks.
You were 20 when you came out?
Yeah,
And Emil?
Same.
Same?
yeah. We
No,
were
I was
just,
22 when I got out.
So you were the
Oh,
old
one,
timer.
one other thing, though, I don't want to hold you guys up. When we got out of service, right, all the colleges were filled. I wanted to go to Notre Dame and couldn't get in. So I said, I'm going to Illinois. But Illinois was so jammed by the time I got there, we went to Navy Pier. I don't know if you
oh
remember.
yeah, Navy.
I went to
Up
Navy
Navy
That was
Pier.
UIC.
But the
went to-
trouble is, when you went to Navy Pier, you got your buddies, oh, let's go have a drink.
Yeah,
your,
you didn't learn.
your studies went down.
Well, you all went on to school then under the GI Bill.
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
I did.
No, I went to work.
Yeah, I went to Morgan Park Junior College and then Navy Pier, University of Illinois, and then Illinois Tech because I didn't want to leave the city.
And when you retired, what type of work had you done in civilian life?
Oh, before the war, I had gotten a job for electromotive, diesel locomotive builder.
103rd Street.
On the third.
And they had to hold my job. That was a law. But I had gone to school, and as such, I was going to school and working. I was an inspector, inspection foreman, inspection general foreman, quality control engineer, senior quality control engineer. I wore a lot of hats. I was a process engineer, I was a tool engineer, and I was there 44 years.
So you retired from there?
I retired from there.
So you
yes.
came back out of the service, took your job, and
Took my job and stayed with them.
okay, how about you, Emil?
Well, my father had a milk dairy in Roseland, Kristen Dairy, so I went to work for him right away. And then proceeded from different jobs and we sold the dairy.
And what did you retire from when you retired? What were
I
you
worked for
doing?
A&R Welding Supply. I was telling you that, didn't I? I work at Lincoln Oaks. I'm sorry, taking too much time.
We bought a lot of your product,
I
our
know.
electromotive.
And I worked for A&R Welding Supplies, and I worked for Lincoln Oaks. And two of us stared at each other yesterday. And he says, you work for me. I said, yeah, my boss. That was Bruce Howard, my own boss.
How about you, Ray? When you came out, what type of work did you do?
I went to work for Commonwealth Edison for 10 years, and then I left there and took over my father-in-law's business, which is known as Eli's Mobile Home Park.
In Homewood?
Yeah, and I ran that from 1956 to 2000, and then we sold it,
and you retired.
I retired and went over to Indiana because my son was living in Sherryville, so we got a townhouse over there. And
but your heart's in Homewood.
Oh yeah, I'm there every Sunday, ain't I?
There you go.
I keep Father Richard.
Just real quickly, your families now. How many children, grandchildren?
I've got 2 boys and a girl. One is my oldest son. He lives in Sherryville. He works for R.J. Millord in up there at
All Millards in town.
And my other son, he's a professor at the University, Roosevelt University downtown, Chicago. And my daughter, she's in Orlando, Florida. She's with Harcourt, the book publisher.
Sure.
And she's works there. And then I've got 4 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren.
How about you, Emil?
Well, let's see, I got 5 children, 4 boys and 1 girl. And let's see, 2 are living in Arizona, one's in Louisville, one's in Indiana. I'm trying
You
to
get to
remember.
bum more than me. I
One
get to go to
St.
Florida.
John. I got, let's see, 6, 7 grandchildren and more.
Mike?
I have one daughter and one granddaughter. My granddaughter is like my agent, but she runs a radio station for a Columbia College on Monday and Friday for 4 hours. And it's a very low-powered station. She says it only goes up to the curb. But they also run on a computer. You can pick it up on a computer, and then my daughter tapes it, and then I get to listen to the tape.
Well, you know, fortunately everything worked out fairly well for you all after you came out of the service, and you were able to have families, raise families, and do it successfully. I'd like to thank you all for sharing a few of your experiences with us.
We want to thank you for listening to us.
Yeah, well, the folks at home will enjoy it. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for asking us.